probably all I need. A little bit shorter than normal, but maybe that's a good thing. All right, good morning. I think we're going to get started. First, we will have an invocation from Reverend Shannon Fleck, Executive Director of the Oklahoma Conference of Churches, and that will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Wesley Robinson, representing Girl Scouts Troop 380. Please stand.
Good morning, everyone. If you will please join me in the spirit of prayer, however that is most comfortable for you. Holiest of holy, we thank you for the ability to be present today physically in this space with our neighbors, physically able to reach out, to see, to look into the eyes of those who live amongst us in this beautiful state. We thank you for being alongside us, especially over the last year and a half. Especially in this chamber with this body who has had to make multiple decisions for the health and well-being of our fellow citizens. We remember this morning that in the Christian Gospel of Matthew, he says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." And blessed may this group be peacemakers. May we remember that the poor are also blessed, called to inherit the earth. May we remember the hand and the power that exists in this room to affect the lives of those called blessed. May decisions be made with true equity rather than the appearance of it. May decisions be made not just with acceptance, but with justice. Not just with open eyes, but open hearts, with mindfulness and grace alongside our call of duty. May we go forward in prayers for strength, especially for our leaders who serve and affect lives. And may we all be called blessed. In your name we pray, amen.
Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend Fleck, and thank you, Wesley. All right, I call this meeting of the City Council to order. We'll start with item 3, Office of the Mayor. There are no ceremonial presentations today. I know you're all excited. But we do have appointments to the Board of Appeals Building Code, Civic Center Foundation, CVB, Oklahoma City Housing Authority, Water Utilities Trust, Zoological Trust, Residential Building Code Commission, Trails Advisory Committee, and the Port Authority. These are items A through I, and we could take them with one motion. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. While you're signing in, Councilman Cooper, how do you wish to vote on the appointments?
Just as I did.
All right, very good. Passes unanimously. All right, item 4 is items from council. There are none today. Item 5 are city manager reports. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, sir. We have a couple of city manager reports this morning. Our first one is our presentation on the Embark customer service survey. I'm going to introduce Jason Fairbrush, our Embark director, let him introduce the speaker this morning and the company that did the survey on behalf of Embark.
Yes, so good morning, Mayor and Council. Jason Fairbrush, Director of Public Transportation and Parking. So pleased to have the opportunity this morning to present you with the results of our recent rider and non-rider survey. Much like the city does a resident survey each year, we as a transit department also do a survey of our customers every year so that we get a sense, of course, of how we're performing and what's important to our customers as far as what they look forward to seeing in transit in the future. And then every other year, we do what we call a non-rider survey. And that survey, as the name implies, is really aimed at people that do not use transit. But again, it's us as a transit agency trying to understand what's important to our community in the areas of transit and what kind of support there is in Oklahoma City for public transit. So with that, the other thing I would mention is that much like we've done within the past year with other planning studies, or whether it's continuing to advance work on the BRT, we did, despite the challenges of last year, go ahead and decide, we still want to know how we're doing. We still want to talk with our customers. We still want to hear from our residents. So in the fall of 2020, the October-November timeframe, we actually initiated our study and began doing our surveying. And so the results of that survey are in, and I have Chris Tatham here from ETC, who I know is a familiar face to council. I'm here to present the results to you. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Chris. Thank you.
It's great to be back. For those of you who don't know me, our firm's actually been doing work for the city for almost 20 years. I've probably made 30 presentations before this group over the years. What I'm going to do is just briefly walk you through the results of this year's surveys. But before I do that, most of you are probably familiar with our work that we do for the community, the annual resident survey. We actually do work for 21 of the 35 largest U.S. cities. But our largest division is actually in transit research. We do work for 18 of the 30 largest transit agencies, including New York MTA, LA Metro, and many others. And so when I share information, it's not just from the context of what we see here in Oklahoma City. It's really based on our vantage point across the country. And this is our Ywca slide that actually just shows a lot of the communities where we do work. So with that said, I'm going to kind of walk you through the next slide. I want to give you the overview of the agenda. I'm going to highlight the major findings from what we found from community or people who aren't currently using transit, and then talk about what we found for people who are using transit services. This year was, as you all know, a very interesting year. The big question for many transit agencies and communities, really, are people still supportive and interested and think transit is a viable transportation option? And two, did agencies actually deliver quality services for the people who continued to use them and need them during COVID-19? The big news up front is, for both of those questions, for Oklahoma City is yes. And I'm going to walk you through why as we go through the survey results. Next slide, just the introduction to the non-rider survey. And most of you who are familiar with that, it is really to give you an objective assessment for what does the average resident in the community think. People tend to be engaged at public meetings, but the average residents don't show up. And it's very hard sometimes to actually know what does the typical resident think about things like transit services and other community issues. Our firm is set to really be non-agenda driven. Our job is to collect data for communities objectively and then provide it to you to help in your decision-making process. So this year we surveyed a number of your residents at random who don't currently use transit services to find out what they think about a wide range of transit issues. And the way we did that is we selected a random sample of 1,275 residents, both in the city of Oklahoma City and also in Norman. We wanted to kind of understand what the folks in Norman are thinking about transit service as well. The results aren't perfect, but if we did the survey 100 times, we'd expect to get the same results within about 2.7% or less 95 times out of 100. So it's a very good sample, similar to what we've done in previous years. First thing I want to share with you is that residents in Oklahoma City continue to think transit's a high priority. In fact, when we ask people, do you feel that Embark's public transit services are valuable to the community, 77% said yes, just 9% said no. So when you look at that, it's almost a 9-to-1 ratio of people thinking it is valuable to not valuable, even in the midst of COVID-19 when a lot of people were not going anywhere outside their home. In addition, one of the things that stands out to me is when we ask people questions about their level of agreement related to transit, you'll see that the one that people most strongly agree with, even though these are non-riders, I want to emphasize that, these are people who have not used transit service, the thing they most agree with is public transportation is important for a thriving community. Only 6% of Oklahoma City residents do not agree with that statement. Also, what's interesting is we ask people why they're not using it, and you'll see most of the things that they cite as reasons for not currently using it are just frankly limitations of the service capacity. It's not because you're not delivering good services with what you currently provide. If you go to the bottom of the list, you'll notice that people think they're not concerned about reliability, they're not concerned about it being on time, they're not concerned about being unsafe. So at the end of the day, you're delivering with what you have now, in the public's view, a very good service. It's just not extensive enough or frequent enough to meet most people's expectations. The other thing that we ask people is what the purposes for public transit should be. And it's not a surprise that serving low income or people who are transit dependent is typically at the top of the list, but you'll see that the number 2 item is actually supporting economic development and access to jobs. Across the board, most of the reasons for providing it were supported, but the economic development was actually number 2 among this long list. In addition, when we ask people overall how important do you think it is for the region to support and fund public transportation, you'll notice that more than 2/3 of the people said it was either very important or somewhat important. Only 6% said it was not important. And the pieces that I oftentimes look at in surveys like this are the intense responses. In other words, what's the ratio of very important to the people who say it's not important? And you see that's 51-6. So people in this community are definitely leading toward the importance of continuing to fund and support public transportation services. This is one of the things I think you should be really proud of. I think you have a great staff, your marketing department. We do a lot of surveys, and oftentimes transit agencies try to rebrand themselves, and they oftentimes do it miserably. In other words, you've had an agency for many years, you market the new name, and then fewer people even know who it is when you're done. What's exciting for me to be able to report to you is now nearly 8 out of 10 of your residents actually knows who Embark is and what services are offered by Embark. That's an incredible accomplishment that you've done in just a few years. So hats off to your team that's helped make that happen. Last couple of things I want to share with you is this myth that people will not use transit. That is a myth because most of you who know people who've gone to Disney World know people have used public transit services. The real issue is what level of service can you provide given the nature of development and things in your community? Can you provide it cost effectively at a level that people would choose to use? And that's oftentimes very difficult. But we ask people under the right conditions what would get them to use it. And you'll see that the issues that people are most concerned about aren't really related to cost, you see down there at the bottom, but they have to do with their access and the frequency of service. And so really at the end of the day, it's the level of service. In a big geographic city like Oklahoma City, that's not cheap to do, but figuring out how to do it in the right places is probably a strategy that makes a lot of sense. And you see there's certainly a lot of people, and these numbers you might say, well, they're below 50%. If you had 10% of your people actually using transit on a regular basis, that would be gigantic. So your goal here is just a couple percent, and you can see you're far beyond that when it comes to the percentage of people who, under the right conditions, would consider it. The other thing, as far as the priorities that really will make the biggest difference in people, when we ask them of all of those things, what would be most likely to cause them to begin using public transit, and you can see all 3 items have to do with really the locations of stops and access and things like that, how long it takes people to get there. So those are going to continually be trade-offs for the community as you move into the future, but there is a willingness and a desire and certainly a perceived importance of having transit community or transit services in the community. As far as the rider survey, this was done separately. This is to get feedback from people who are currently using your services. And this was a challenging year for most transit agencies because of COVID-19. A lot of people weren't sure, would riders feel safe? Would they continue using it? And ridership did drop off nationally, in some cases rather significantly, but overall ridership here actually comparatively did pretty well. One of the things that we did for this survey is that we've compared it to the previous surveys so you'd have a really good trend line. You know, sometimes I come back to you and it seems like the results might be the same. Well, if you have really good results, that's okay. You have something like COVID-19 happen, then you wonder, well, what happened in that year? And if you don't measure, you really don't know whether or not your response was good. Was your team implementing services well? Did the extra things that you do make any difference? And are your riders still happy? Because if they're not, potentially the people who really depended on it will start finding new places and new ways to get to the destinations. As far as this year's survey, we administered it also to a sample of a little over 1,200 riders. We included 214 who are using services in Norman. And you can see the overall precision of this sample is similar to the non-rider survey at 2.5% at the 95% level of confidence. As far as the findings for this, among the services that we conduct customer survey research, Embark is one of the top performers. In fact, later this year, we're compiling all of the data from more than 20 transit agencies where we've conducted surveys in the past 18 months, and your ratings are very, very good. But I'll wait and make that announcement officially in a few more months. But some of the things that we looked at on the survey is how safe people feel riding, everything from what they think about the drivers, the cleanliness, and I won't read the entire list to you. Probably the takeaway here is how blue it is. Blue are positive ratings on a 5-point scale. A rating that's called neutral, people don't actually say they're neutral. They gave a 3 on a 5-point scale. It means it's okay, it meets their expectations, but across the board in every single area that was assessed, you're doing well. What I was particularly impressed with is when you look at the very top, the safe operations of the bus, how safe people feel, and even as you work your way down to the bottom, the cleanliness of bus shelters, things like that, all rated well during COVID-19. In addition, if you look at the next charts, they show you some of the trends, and you can see 2020 compared to 2016, at least for the items that have assessed, not a lot of significant difference. So even though there were a lot of challenges for Embark this year, you actually continued to deliver very high quality services, both on these items and also if you take a look at the next slide, shows you a few additional items that were assessed. All in all, no real significant changes. One of the biggest increases, though, long term, happens to be in the cleanliness of the buses, you can see, which has gone from 62 to 69. So one of the issues that was really important to people this year, you actually continue to do even better during COVID-19, even given the expectations that people likely had. The other piece that you might be interested in, because you've invested a lot of resources in it, are your streetcar. These numbers are among the very best of any community that we survey. You can see across the board on pretty much every area, not only do you have a combined large percentage of folks giving satisfied and very satisfied ratings, which is in blue, take a look at the percentage that are giving you 5s. In other words, these are people who are really satisfied. In almost every area, you'll see 2/3 or more of the respondents giving you among the highest ratings. And we look at the next slide, just shows you some of the trends, and you can see overall continued to maintain very high levels of service. In fact, some of the areas, a number of them actually improved during the past year, which is terrific. And when we look at the next chart, you'll notice that you're getting a lot of different people from backgrounds using it. And again, this was in the middle of COVID when the survey was conducted, and you can see 2/3 of the folks using it were visitors coming to the downtown area. You can see a mix of male and female. About 1 in 10 actually works in the downtown area. You can see a mix of racial, income, and other factors. But we have a lot of data from the survey that you'll be able to track over time and hopefully be able to use for other purposes to really assess who's using it and how they're using it over time. As far as some of the things that we also looked at were some of the challenges that people have. The system has historically been difficult for people to use in terms of the number of transfers that they have to make, but you're making progress there. If you actually look at the next slide, you'll actually see the number of reported transfers that people said they had to make, and it's built into your system because you have a transit center, so we expect to see a lot of people transferring, but you'll notice that the percentage transferring this year who made no transfers or just one actually increased. It's probably a combination of the types of trips people are making, but also the simplicity of getting from one point to the other for many people, causing fewer people to need to take transfers. Some of the other findings that we had on this year's survey have to do with opportunities for improvement. And if you look at the list of things that we had people rate, we do collect two sets of data. The first is having people rate these attributes or how well is the service being delivered. The second is the priority of those items. And you'll notice that among the most important items, buses arriving on time was right at the top of the list. Availability and accessibility of bus stops was number 2. Frequency of service was number 3. If you go over to how well you're doing, you can see at the very top how safe you feel riding on the bus stop. That was number 1. Safe operations of buses was number 2. And the ease of paying your fare was actually number 3. When we do our analysis, we take a look at where are your opportunities based on what's important to people and how well you're doing. And you can see the having buses arrive on time, frequency of service, and even the courtesy of drivers are the top 3 opportunities to continue to do well. What's nice about that is drivers you already have. That's something you can impact and continue to make a positive impact on your customers by making sure your drivers continue to be customer focused. And that's a big retention piece for a lot of people who actually get to know the drivers on the same route. And that says a lot about the people who are working for your service and providing it daily to your customers. So with that, these are the summary points. The big takeaways from my perspective, having done many of these surveys this year, is that while in some communities they've seen public attitude towards transit change rather significantly, it continues to be very, very strong here in Oklahoma City among the people who aren't even using the service. They think it's important to fund, not just to take care of people who can't get from one place to another, but also for economic development and other purposes. You're doing a great job delivering the service, even though times are very, very difficult, and there's opportunities to do better. But a lot of that, you've got a lot of priorities. I'll come back with other survey results to share you about other priorities as well. But this is to help you understand what the transit issue looks like and how people who are using it and not using it think about the issue. So with that, if there's any questions, Mayor, I'd be happy to answer them.
I do have just one question regarding the non-rider survey. I assume you do those sorts of surveys in other communities that you were talking about. Do you see much difference between like non-rider attitudes towards transit here compared to those other communities?
Yeah, actually what's interesting here is this is where the percentage of people who are using transit, the overall scope of transit is rather, I would say, on the small side compared to a lot of the other places that we do work for, yet the perceived importance seems to be higher. And so that is somewhat unusual. So It's not dramatically different, but when you look at it compared to other communities where you expect to have larger transit systems, typically you think that the people in those communities would think it's even more important, where here perhaps the absence of the service is causing people to think that way instead.
Okay, thank you.
I know I've spoken at length about transit, and I knew you were doing your presentation this morning, which thank you, and thank you for presenting to the Transit Trust at COPPA earlier this month. So I didn't anticipate having any remarks on this morning, but I just can't help myself because I know we have a couple new council members with us since we passed MAPS last year with the 2 new bus rapid transits, for instance. And then, I don't know, I just really wanted to speak, I think, to the importance of transit for Ward 2. It was a top priority for voters. It was believe me when I tell you, it was public transportation, it was public education, it was walkability, and it was homelessness. These were just the highest things on people's minds. And I think a lot about how car culture, especially here, and I was just having this conversation last night, car culture in especially this part of the country is a rite of passage for a teenager. There are all manner of books. You think of Kerouac on the Road or whatever it is. The road story plays a pivotal role in the American myth-making of who we are and those sort of milestones that a child goes through to achieve maturation, and a car plays a very important role in that. And in this city, since for decades we haven't really invested in a prioritizing way in public transit, the car plays even more of a shaping role, right? I say all that to say then, it's fascinating to me that in Ward 2, public transit is that high of a priority, knowing that the car has played such a pivotal role in shaping that, like, I mean, when I say milestone for a kid, I mean, it's freedom. That's that moment. I'm getting my first job, maybe, and I am going to demonstrate a work ethic to maybe have a car payment, a down payment, maintenance on this car. All of these things get wrapped up into the idea of having a car. And yet, you just heard non-riders say that public transit is that important to them. And I really think we should take time to let that simmer in our brains, that somehow in a city, in a part of the country that is so car and vehicle, that non-riders said it is pivotal to a thriving community that we have public transit. And I know that might also run counter, and I think as you were talking, I was just looking across the entire horseshoe and thinking about that 621 square miles. It might be easy for a resident to think, because of, you know, more sprawling parts of the city, that people would not think of transit, public transit, as a priority, but it is. And I can't wait to ride with some of my new counselors. I've already done this with Councilman Stonecipher, but I'd love to do this with all of you, is just kind of go through Ward 2 and show you how, when that BRT comes, how that's going to connect a significant part of Ward 2, how people who live at Northwest Expressway and Meridian right now, right by Lake Hefner, are going to be able to get down here and use that streetcar. That streetcar, I suspect those numbers are about to shift when BRT comes, and it won't just be the tourist. It'll be people who live along Northwest Expressway using a BRT to get along class and down here to work, right? So I just can't wait to go out there with you all and kind of show you all how important it is that BRT is going to connect our neighborhoods and our neighbors to the transit down here. And then hopefully, God willing, I see the Chamber of Commerce, I see some representatives here from there, but now starting to think about that regional part, connecting people to, hopefully, God willing again, that voters will say we need light rail connecting Edmond down to Norman, expanding some sort of rail service out to Tinker. I just wanted to say that right now. I'm so excited to see those non-riders who have a choice actually prioritizing transit. And I think that is a clarion call for the rest of our council members, that we start thinking in these subsequent budgets about how we can keep improving upon those investments. I will just conclude by saying how worried I am about the operations funding for public transit, because as I took those notes there, 15-minute frequency is just that important. It's just that important that we achieve 15-minute frequency for our entire bus system. And right now I'm to understand that it will be several $1 million a year to operate that Northwest BRT. We have 2 more in MAPS 4. We just lost the OU Medical Center in terms of paying sales tax to us. So I think almost daily I think about how are we going to better fund the actual operations of our public transit system. And I'm speaking at length about it right now because I would like to see that be on everyone's minds as well. So proud of Embark, can't wait to help them improve even more.
All right, thank you, Chris, appreciate it. Thanks for all the work you all do. Next up, we have Roy Williams, the CEO and President and CEO of the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce, with the Economic Development Update.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mr. City Manager, thank you for the opportunity to give you a brief update on some activities we've been involved in recently, beginning with the conclusion of the legislative session. Overall, we think of this session as being successful, even though most of the work we did was playing defense instead of playing offense, but nonetheless, we think it was good. A couple of things that happened out there. One was we were successful in stopping an attempt that would have amended the state quality job incentive, which would have increased the average threshold in both Oklahoma and Tulsa counties by over $20,000. So more than 50% of the projects that we have in our current pipeline would have been unable to participate in state incentives had this bill passed. There was also an attempt to do this same thing with the 5-year ad valorem tax exemption for new and expanding manufacturing facilities, but this effort was defeated as well. So it again shows the rural-urban fighting that continues to go on in Oklahoma. Unfortunately, there are legislators who believe that if they can stop companies from coming to Oklahoma City or Tulsa, then they'll go to rural Oklahoma, but that is not the case. We were all, speaking of regional transit, we were able to get the regional transit bill, Senate Bill 967, passed, and it was signed by the governor. We had favorable outcomes in the gun legislation that were proposed, and a key one was legislation that now allow concerts in Scissortail Park without guns. So we were pleased that passed. There was also additional progress on criminal justice reform, including an appropriation of $12.5 million for drug rehabilitation, mental health treatment, job training, and education. And the Criminal Justice Advisory Council and the Chamber both lobbied in support of this appropriation. We also worked with the city and the county to protect the city-county health department from increased state influence. We supported funding for the Heartland Flyer and the expansion of it, and for continued funding for ODOT's 8-year transportation plan. And finally, we supported the $42 million appropriation that will expand broadband in the state's unserved and underserved areas, was included in the state budget agreement. Moving to the hospitality sector, we're continuing to see a rebound in the hospitality industry. Through the month of May, hotel occupancy reached 58%. That's compared to pre-pandemic 66%. So not quite there yet, but it's heading in the right direction. And we believe that as business travel continues to return, we'll see those numbers returning to pre-pandemic levels. As well, as all of you know, the leisure, sports, and convention business is really solidly coming back. Our lead volume as well for future meetings is growing very rapidly, and we're at pre-pandemic numbers and exceeding them. And we are also seeing larger meetings in the pipeline that reflect our new product, the new convention center, and what we have to offer. Speaking of a pipeline, our economic development pipeline remains very strong. Business development activity is increasing as we see more and more in-person meetings and conferences opening around the country. Our team has been on the road now talking with prospects and consultants, and we're seeing a lot more in-person site visits in Oklahoma City now. Our local manufacturing sector is indicating rising levels of demand for the products reaching and exceeding pre-pandemic levels, and the effects of shutdowns are also driving disruptions. The supply chain is creating lots of issues. And we continue to hear from companies about the shortage of talent for entry-level jobs. This is not one industry specific, it's across the board. It's in manufacturing, hospitality, back office, retail, et cetera. Every 5 years, we do a deep dive study into the aerospace industry, and we just completed that a couple of months ago. And what we're trying to figure out is what's the status of it and what's the future going to look like. That study showed that employment in the aerospace sector has grown by 6,640 jobs, an 18% increase in the last 5 years, from 2015 to 2020. The total workforce in that sector now is roughly 44,000 people with annual income of $3.4 billion. So not only is employment growing, but also the number of new aerospace establishments has grown by 55 to reach a total of 291 in our city now. The interesting fact, too, out of this study this year is that while the public sector is still the dominant employer in the aviation sector, growth in the private sector is outpacing the public sector. And now about 40% of all aviation aerospace jobs are in the private sector, not in the public sector. And we're seeing that continue to increase. A little bit about some of our DEI work. I wanted to mention we've completed our initial series of 6 diversity webinars with the business community around issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The response was very strong, with over 460 people attending at least one of our seminars, and we had total participation in excess of 1,300 people. We're now launching our next initiative, Inclusion at Work OKC, which is a collaboration of diversity leaders and managers within companies. These are companies at all stages of implementation programming in DEI. And so we will be sharing best practices, shared resources, and opportunities to work together. The last thing I'll mention is that we're working right now to prepare to host the annual conference of the International Economic Development Council in September of 2022. That organization actually reached out to us several years ago asking us to host the event, and we agreed to do it when our new convention center was complete. This one event will bring more than 1,000 members of our industry, including economic developers, elected officials, corporate site location consultants, and other affiliated businesses. And we're developing a host committee right now from professionals across Oklahoma. And I'm pleased to say that Bill Lance with the Chickasaw Nation and Kent Shortridge of the Oklahoma Natural Gas are co-chairing the host committee. This will be a big showcase event for Oklahoma City. With that, I'll conclude. Happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Any questions for Roy?
Yes, listening to the things that we heard, especially in the last couple of months when we also had another update of what was going on. As far as our legislative session is concerned, where were we as far as our chamber supporting the bill, Senate bill that Senator Young put forth to support minority businesses in our state, especially with him representing a major part of Oklahoma City and those disadvantaged and minority businesses? I didn't hear anything about that particular bill or any efforts of us supporting that type of legislation, especially in the lens of us talking about how we're supporting those businesses through the different initiatives that we like to put on a pedestal, that we're helping so many of our minority businesses when we clearly understood and understand what took place last year during the pandemic and how many were at risk and or closed because of just the hardships that were already in front of them and continue to take place now.
It was in our legislative agenda and we were supportive of it.
Well, I didn't hear anything about it. And I know as we continue the conversations of DEI, as I continue to peruse through the website for the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber, I still don't see anything that pertains to the commitment of the Chamber pertaining to DEI, and I've been looking all over for it. So if it's a certain tab I need to look for, I would love to figure out where it is, because it's very hard for us to say we're promoting these things when, again, there's no evidence that we are practicing these same things we want others to do. So that's concerning for me, especially in the lens of us wanting to support again, these businesses in the lens of bringing more diverse businesses, more businesses that can help us expand the diversity of our city and really, again, continue to speak about this One OKC initiative that we continue to put forward for our city. So those are real challenges for me as far as trying to understand how we support and see how other businesses are able to either come to this city or thrive in this city. That was a question.
Well, I think our commitment is obvious because of our partnership with the Urban League, because of the financial commitment that we have made, and because of all of the different programming that's coming out of that. That's really all on the website, so I'm still not certain what you might be referring to that the Chamber isn't doing
The Greater
anything.
Oklahoma City Chamber's commitment, not the partnership, but the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber's commitment as an entity, which I asked about a few months ago that I still haven't seen. So those are, again, those are reasons and challenges for myself to really understand how businesses that are in my community are being supported and or are made a priority just as others. And it's hard for me to really see advocacy and policy that this tab on the OKC Chamber website shows without even supporting those initiatives. Okay. That speaks to why I don't see it.
Any other questions for Roy?
Yeah, one other question, Mr. Williams. You mentioned the convention that's coming in September of 2022, bring 1,000 members, and I'm really excited to hear about that. But can you give us a little broader picture on what's going on with the convention center now and the interest that's we're receiving as far as booking conventions are concerned?
Yes, and y'all will have a report from the president of the CVB as well, who'll give you some more in-depth information. But we're seeing a significant level of interest, an increased level of interest from meeting planners who are now finally having their meetings in person. So we're seeing that really, really hype up. And the other thing is, you know, this is the only new convention center basically in the United States. And so there's a lot of talk about that. There's a lot of talk about how that particular facility is physically within our community with the park across the street, new hotel, the transit system that serves it, et cetera. So there's a lot of buzz about it. And as I said in my remarks, we're getting a lot more bookings of much larger conventions than what we had anticipated.
Roy,
Go ahead, David.
I'm sorry. Is it too early to give us an indication as to what you think the future of retail will look like coming out of the pandemic? Do you see us returning to pre-2020 levels of in-person retail activity?
I don't have a crystal ball, but in reading and listening and talking with peers and stuff, you know, as we come out of the pandemic, we do see a lot more in-person retail shopping and purchasing happening. Mm-hmm. But too, you know, there's been a shift in retailers' opportunity on online sales and, you know, indirect sales basically. So I think a lot of retailers are changing how they do their retail business.
Yes.
But the in-person is still critical to a lot of them. But so many of them now have created very robust online tools to make it much easier to where people can buy directly as opposed to just through Amazon or something like that.
Right.
You know, with regard to big box retail, it looks like that's changing, that there's going to be less and less of that. And how that really impacts shopping malls and large strip centers, I think still remains to be seen.
Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation. A few questions. What are you hearing, kind of building on Councilman Greenwell's question, what are you hearing right now, particularly as this new variant conversation is happening? What are you hearing about this sort of the apprehensions that a lot of workers have? Well, it's not just even apprehension, it's right, there's almost like this, my friends talk about it right now, it's like a state of flux, right, where some employers who have traditionally paid wages that now a worker is looking at it and saying, well, maybe I have more options than I did previously, right? So there seems like in the job market, there's a state of flux. But then it also seems like we're not out of the woods yetness of this moment. What are you hearing right now? It seems like these have got to be conversations circling around you in recent days.
You know, I think initially everybody was thinking we're going to go back to where we were. Mm-hmm. And now they're beginning to think maybe not so much. But that doesn't mean everybody's going to work from home. It just means that workers, a lot of workers now liked the flexibility that they had, which doesn't necessarily mean they would work at home 5 days a week or whatever. But we're seeing companies now see the advantages of, some of, depending what kind of business they're in and industry they're in, that they can reduce overhead costs by having employees working from home. So it's not just a net benefit to the employee, it's also a net benefit to the company as well. There's still questions about productivity, there's still questions about company and corporate culture and how that will impact. There's concerns that people who don't come into the office won't become a part of the fabric of the company, and thus that could be a detriment to them in moving up the ladder organizationally. But this is all real early. This is not, yet set in stone or anything like that. But there will be more people who work from home than what used to be. That was a trend that was already started. The pandemic just speeded it up. But there are certainly a lot of businesses that they have to have the people there because they're hands-on kind of employees. So, you can't really say what the percentages are going to be, but there are indications that potentially as much as 20% of the workforce might work at home.
And then thank you for that. And then to the other question, are you hearing shifts in conversations right now about people wanting to re-enter kind of the marketplace or do these travelings for conventions or anything like that just because of where numbers have been in recent weeks?
Yeah, I think there's a hesitancy in the business community. There doesn't seem to be a hesitancy in the leisure community.
Okay.
Where individuals make their own decisions as opposed to company policies. We're seeing them opt to move and travel a whole lot more than what businesses are willing to subject their employees to. So businesses are taking a much more conservative approach to that than what leisure travelers are. And you can see that by going to the airport and talking to hoteliers about who's traveling, who's staying in there, and it's leisure travelers.
And then my final question, and I just hadn't had a chance to visit the chamber site myself until the interaction you all just had there. So I'm wondering if the next time we see each other, if it would be helpful to maybe hear a couple updates on a few of these bullet points that I'm seeing here on the page. Like I said, this is my first time visiting it. But one of the things I'd like to kind of hear more about, and maybe you can even speak to it now, I'm not sure. So I see through that partnership, so there's a couple things. So like one where you all talk about developing annual research publication that tracks and reports on diversity and economic equality in Oklahoma City. When was the last time we received that sort of update, and when could we kind of hear more about that?
Well,
would be a question.
what we're trying to do is figure out what's a good measure of that.
Okay.
Because as we look at other communities around the country, there aren't really good models out there. And we think it's a really important thing to track. So we're trying to figure out what are the key indicators of all of that, and how do you get the research? Where does it come from? And who should do it? Because you need certainly a credible entity that produces that. So it's never been done. There are national organizations and entities that do it, but they use numbers that everybody kind of questions. So we thought it'd be better if we could do it locally.
Which leads me to the next one in terms of an update that would be helpful, at least from my perspective. I'm not sure where Councilwoman Nice is on some of these, but we have a diversity council of executives.
Yes.
That's examining this data that we're wanting. Is it that they're going to be examining data once we start accumulating it and determining a strategy to make Oklahoma City a more diverse and inclusive?
Right. They're essentially an advisory board that helps us make sure we're measuring and addressing the issues that are important to them. Yes.
So yeah, I guess that would be something I'd want to have more regular updates on, would just kind of be where we at as we start collecting this data. What are we doing to, the next bullet point was creating leadership and mentorship programs to grow and invest in Oklahoma talent. So I guess I'd like to kind of do a deeper dive on this with you all and kind of better understand it and how, again, Ward 2 might be of any.
Well, we and the Urban League could both come and do a presentation on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Appreciate your partnership and your leadership.
Yeah, thank you so much, Roy. Really appreciate our partnership with the Chamber.
The only other thing I have is claims and payroll, and that is available on okc.gov as well as on the agenda. That's all I have on city manager reports.
All right, that brings us to item 6, Journal of Council Proceedings. Apparently item B has a pretty obvious typo there in its header, and so that meeting has not occurred yet. And so with no objection, we're going to strike item 6B, but we can take up item 6A. So if anyone wants to make a motion virtually. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 7, request for uncontested continuances. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, sir, we have several. Starting off on page 10, item 11H, PUD 1820. The applicant and the council member have discussed deferring this one to the August 3rd agenda. And then on item 11K, again, the applicant has agreed to defer this item to the August 3rd agenda. And that's SPUD 1268. Then on page 11, item 11P1, all of these items will be stricken from the agenda. Item A, 3605 South Meta Avenue, the owner is removed. Item B, 1626 Northwest 7th Street, to re-notify for additional structures. Item G, 1103 Northwest 84th Street, the owner has removed. And then on page 12, item 11Q1, again, all these items are stricken from the agenda. Item A, 1241 Belvedere Drive, the owner is secured. Item B, 1408 North Blackwelder Avenue, the owner is secured. Item E, 2401 North Classen Boulevard, the owner is secured. Item I, 1307 Linwood Boulevard, the owner is secured. Item K, 6120 Rain Tree Drive, the owner is secured. Item L, 1626 Northwest 7th Street, to re-notify for dilapidated. Item P, 6501 Northwest 11th Street, to re-notify for additional structures. Item Q, 1115 Northeast 14th Street, the owner has secured. Item S is 410 Southeast 16th Street, the owner has secured. Item W, 3517 Northwest 21st Street, the owner is secured. Item Y, 815 Northwest 33rd Street, the owner is secured. Item AE, 1153 Northwest 83rd Street, the owner is secured. On page 13, item 11R1, all these items are stricken from the agenda. Item A, 1408 North Blackwelder Avenue, the owner is secured. Item D, 2401 North Classen Boulevard, the owner is secured. Item H, 6120 Rain Tree Drive, the owner is secured. Item J, 6501 Northwest 11th Street, to re-notify for additional structures. Item L, 1115 Northeast 14th Street, the owner is secured. Item N, 410 Northeast 16th Street, the owner is secured. And item Q, 815 Northwest 33rd Street, the owner has secured. That's all the items I have.
City Manager,
Yes.
back on Q, did
Yeah.
you also say, where's that Classen one go? It's the same address that was struck on item R, the 2401. So where did I see that? So item E was struck on Q as well, right?
E is on Q1.
So it was also.
E was stricken,
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 8, revocable permits and events. We do have item A here, firework revocable permit with the Riversport Foundation for a fireworks display as part of the opening ceremony watch party. This is July 23rd using the Regatta Park Zone, and we do have Megan Duffy who has signed up to speak on this item.
Good morning. Megan Duffy. Do I need to say my address?
Sure,
again?
go ahead.
17014 Valley Lane, Edmond. Oklahoma City Services, though. We are looking to celebrate the opening of the Olympic Games on Friday down at Riversport in the Boathouse District. We'll have live music, food and drink specials, Olympic activities. We're lucky enough to offer 4 Olympic sports in our venue. So we will have Ski OKC, Surf OKC open late until 9 p.m. And then we will also have a rowing activity, and a sprint kayak activity. That one should be the funnest. We're actually going to do a sprint kayak dunk challenge, so seeing how long you can stay in the boat before you flip. All of that will culminate with some fireworks around 9 p.m. a little later, and we will offer floating fireworks for that, so you can actually float in that lower basin of the Whitewater Center when the pumps are off and watch. So,
Yeah, this is exciting times when the Olympics arrive because of our status as an Olympic training facility. And also, I know Friday night we'll be highlighting, this has already been announced, but we're going to kind of bring renewed attention to it, highlighting the Super Cup event that's going to be coming to Oklahoma City in next month.
yes, yeah, next month, August 21st, and we're really looking forward to that. So we're looking at kind of capping both ends of it. So wrapping up with the Olympians in August, kicking it off this weekend with them.
Yeah, very cool. Councilwoman Nice?
Yes, I know everyone in the Boathouse District is excited about this weekend. So hopefully, if you get time, come on down and join the festivities and see the fireworks on the water. I mean, you can't beat that. So with that, I will move for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. And by the way, what time are the fireworks?
They'll be a little after 9 p.m.
Okay.
So we'll be live streaming the opening ceremonies up until then also.
Cool. Oh, okay. How would you like to vote? How would you like to vote? Okay. Passes unanimously.
Thank you guys for your time. Hope to see you.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, item 8B, revocable right-of-way use permit with the Britton Business District, Inc. to hold Britton District Day on Saturday, July 31st, West Britton Road between North Ollie and North Francis. And I don't have anyone signed up, but there's someone wearing a Britton shirt, so I kind of feel like this is a happy coincidence, or?
Drew was going to be here. Okay. Hi, I'm Grace. I'm Powell. Do I need to give my address?
Sure, go ahead.
11416 Northwest 101st Street, Yukon, Oklahoma, in Oklahoma City, Ward 1. I'm the executive director of the Britton District, and we are attempting to hold our second district day. We had to skip because of 2020. We're really excited. We've got a lot of new things. We've got some exciting support from the city, and we're going to have some food trucks and live music, and we would like to close the street this year. It was a little scary last year. I don't know if you remember jaywalking with me. So everyone's excited about that.
Great. Who wants to take it?
James went to me first. I will say I'm so sad we won't have our residential DJ this year. I think he said he wasn't going to be here, but he's going to do a playlist.
Yes, there is a playlist, and we'll put it on our Facebook page so we can all experience it if we like.
Yes, so we usually talk music when I see him, so I think we're all excited. And actually, James and I were just talking, Councilperson Cooper, excuse me, we were talking about it yesterday about us, we're coming together so we can have so much fun on the 31st. So I'm definitely looking forward to that, and our new businesses that have opened since we saw you all last for the first one.
Yeah, one of the things we're really celebrating is we were kind of doing a placemaking event in 2019. We had kind of pop-up shops in a bunch of empty spaces, and all of the spaces on the north side are full now, with the exception of one that's kind of under construction, but it will be occupied soon. So it's just amazing to see, despite kind of setbacks that everybody had in 2020, how much we've been able to grow in the last 2 years.
It's been such a pleasure seeing you all grow and sharing the Britton District with Ward 7 and Councilwoman Nice and getting to hang out with you all. And I'm so excited about that update you just provided. Honestly, one of my very favorite moments was right before I started running for office, and I just started looking around the Ward 2 map, and I was like, oh, the Britton District? That just really made me so happy, and so it's really been just truly an honor to be able to work with you all and to help have city support behind some of the work you all are doing. I just think it's a critical area, critical area. So with that, I would move for approval alongside Councilwoman Nice. And we'll see you all on the 31st.
Thanks.
Everyone else, come on up.
Yes, everyone's
Come on up.
we have a lot to celebrate.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Thanks. We'll see you on the 31st. All right, now we'll recess the council meeting and convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority, where we have items A through E we can take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn OCMFA and convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority, where we have items A through D we could take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Sorry. Councilwoman Hammond, have you had a chance to vote on this item? Okay. How do you, but it's not coming through? Yeah, wish to vote yes? Okay. Passes unanimously. All right, we'll adjourn OCPPA and reconvene as the City Council, where we find ourselves on page 3 of your printed agenda. Item 9, the consent docket. There's a scheduled presentation on item R, but that is it. Is there another item, any other items that the council wishes to pull out for separate discussion or a separate vote?
Mr. Mayor, item BK, Baker King, that needs to be voted on separately. I'll need to recuse myself for that as I serve on the board of the YWCA.
Okay.
Item W.
Okay.
And AK.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes, Mayor AB is an Albert Boy. I don't know what to come up with. You like that? Thank you. Bravo.
All right, why don't we handle the separate vote first? So, Councilwoman Young, if you wouldn't mind stepping out. Okay, so this is item 9BK, resolution approving a sole source service agreement with the YWCA. We could take a motion on this. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously and with Councilwoman Young out of the room. All right, now we'll go back to the top of the consent docket, which means that we'll start in order with item R. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Eric Winger, our Public Works Director, is just going to give us a quick update on this project.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager, Mayor, and Council. We're going to pull up a PowerPoint here in just a moment. I'm Eric Winger, I'm Public Works Director, and I'm going to be pleased to present to you item R today. This is the preliminary engineering report for Southeast 59th Bicycle Enhancement Project. This is actually one of the Better Street, Safer City projects that's underway, and we're to a point now we're able to present this project for your consideration. So you'll see several elements of this. It's a joint project between Planning and Public Works. It's also a route that's identified in Bike Walk OKC. So as a background, it's one of the 11 Better Street, Safer City temporary sales tax bike infrastructure projects. It was originally conceived, and if you were to look at your Bike Walk OKC plan on 59th from Santa Fe to Air Depot. But we have found that there's a lot of high traffic in a portion of that corridor, especially west of I-35, that prohibits this from being a Tier 1 facility. Just as a refresher, when we look at the tiers for bicycle infrastructure, Tier 1 is the protected. It includes a dedicated bike lane with delineators. A Tier 2 is a bike lane that's been identified, and then a Tier 3 is more commonly known as a Shero. But we do have lower traffic counts east of I-35, so we still have the opportunity to maintain a significant portion of the route that's identified in the plan. So we've looked at a partial realignment, and so this is something that we've experienced in some of the bike walk studies. When the plan was put together, there was not a detailed survey done citywide to determine if all the routes could actually be achieved, and so we have found a slight alternate adjustment to this route that uses a portion of Eastern Avenue from Grand to Southeast 59th, but then it also maintains the Southeast 59th 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 We have adequate roadway width. We've also checked the traffic counts in this corridor, and we've got the counts that are well within the range of being able to consider a potential lane reduction. The lane reduction would go from a 4-lane section to a 3-lane section on both Eastern and Southeast 59th, and this would leave a section that has 2 11-foot driving lanes, 1 center turn lane, 2 4-foot bicycle lanes, then also 2-foot buffers for each of those bicycle lanes to receive the delineators. If you're familiar with the Walker Avenue bicycle infrastructure project, this would be a section that would look much like that once completed. It would be a 3-lane section, Tier 1, delineated with bike lanes. If we find that there's some sections that have additional width, and this is sometimes things that are found in the field, they would add that additional width to either the bike lane or the buffer. Most of the bike lane projects have been challenging for Oklahoma City as we've moved forward. They're not simply just striping. They're not just simply just installing new delineators. And so this project actually includes some other work that would include some partial resurfacing. When we do resurfacing work, we're required to do ADA upgrades, especially at the intersection. So you'll see that we would have to upgrade some pedestrian facilities, including possibly some of the signalization at the intersections. We may have some sidewalk requirements that would be triggered by the resurfacing. Also, the striping would be the major component. So the funding for the project, and this is very, this is a point that needs to be made. We currently have $500,000 available that was a part of the Better Streets project. Planning and Public Works had submitted an application to the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments for grant funding, and we were awarded $2.4 million that would go also towards this project. However, we've done some preliminary cost estimates. The current estimate with all of the work is about $5.4 million. So there is a gap being able to complete this significant section as proposed. And this would, again, would be a Tier 1. Now, we've addressed these budget differences in the past. We're at the preliminary report phase, so we have not completed the final detailing. We would use consulting staff and get that finally determined. There are some available funds within the Better Street, Safer City Bicycle Infrastructure Program. If we were to choose to use some of those additional funds, that would be an item that would be taken back to the advisory board and one that they would recommend to the city council to proceed. But it was important for us to come before the council today to present the preliminary report. It was heard by the advisory board at their meeting this month. They were at a point where they received the report. They did not make a recommendation. So it's before you today as the city council to make a decision on proceeding with this preliminary report that would advance it then to the final plans. We would be in a position to be bringing back final plans. We'd also be bringing back potentially a budget revision for your future consideration. Currently, we're on track for completing the design this summer, going into next year's, and then construction beginning next year in 2022. And then these just next few slides, this is looking at 59th Street. And again, it's a 4-lane facility. At the top of the drawing, and we're looking from, this is Eastern Avenue, so this is Southeast 59th and Eastern. This would just be a typical striping plan of what that would look like. And again, if you're familiar with Walker Avenue and the work that was done south of downtown Oklahoma City, it's very similar. It's the 3 lanes. You'll see the center turn lane that's continuous that is in the middle of the drawing as we head to the east. And this section just continues east as we advance the project on Southeast 59th. This is at Bryant Avenue. Again, you'll see the green bike boxes. You'll see the protected lanes. You'll see that we're maintaining the turn lanes at the intersections. This is going further east, and this is where it finally ends near Sunny Lane and 59th. So with that, we have the preliminary report for your consideration today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I have a question. So Eric, these funds would, do they total about $2 million to make up for the?
So that would be the projected gap today, yes. This is approximately $2 million.
And they would just come out of unallocated funds within the Better Streets, Safer City?
That would be the current proposals to use the Better Street, Safer City sales tax funds for that difference.
Yeah. How much is remaining in the unallocated portion?
I need to come back to you on that.
That's
what
fine.
I would share is that both the bike lane and the street enhancement projects that are part of Better Streets have not been fully allocated, with the understanding that each project that we've entered into has had a gap, and we've had to use some of those unallocated funds. And so let me bring that back to you, Councilman.
Thank you.
Eric, thanks for the presentation. I know we've talked about this before, but do we have a way of gaining input from those that will be affected by the lane closure?
We have reached out when we have individual property owners that might be impacted, especially in areas of Oklahoma City where there's parking that they may have had on-street parking. Obviously, the driveway accesses, if there's any businesses or residences along either the corridor on Eastern or Southeast 59th, we would work with them directly to make sure that their access is not lost. But we haven't traditionally on the arterial streets had a large stakeholder input session when we are meeting the criteria that were established for lane reductions or just the installation of bike lanes that are in the Bike Walk OKC plan. But we work with the property owners individually.
One other question. When we're measuring traffic, do we have a way of capturing busy hour traffic or bouncing busy hour traffic versus static daily traffic?
We typically have been using the average daily traffic, but we do have the opportunity to capture the peak traffic if we feel that there's a concern. I think where we would find the concern most would be at the intersections, especially if we've got a business that maybe has a lot of left turning traffic. In that case, that's why the 3-lane section that's being proposed appears to work best, because it still allows for those center turns without impacting the through lanes. But we could do an additional study if needed, if there's an area of interest that needs further study.
Okay, thanks.
You mentioned the advisory committee made no recommendation. Can you tell us why there was no recommendation and what the discussion that occurred during that meeting?
So they had some concerns with the project somewhat being over the expected budget. They also wanted to make sure that with the lane reduction that they had the support of the city council before actually proceeding. And so they wanted to go ahead and receive the report and make sure it was provided to this council to make sure that they could weigh in, that you could weigh in. And so they're actually awaiting your decision. Upon the approval of the preliminary report, we would then work with them on the additional funding and finishing up the final plans for the project. If it's not approved, we would report that back to them as well.
Mr. Winger, thank you for your presentation. Can you speak to how much commercial vehicle traffic we have on this street right now?
So I don't know that we have a difference in commercial versus commuter versus different types of traffic.
Okay.
I've got the slide that I could pull back up that showed the general counts that we have as the latest numbers. So on Eastern Avenue, we're running on average almost 6,300 cars a day, and on 59th, we're running about 5,200.
Just so I make sure I heard you correctly, you can't tell me how many of those were semis.
We have not we don't have counts for specifically for truck traffic.
Okay.
Again, we could do a specialized study to find that out, but we have not done that.
Are there any businesses in that area that are predominantly served by trucks?
I don't know the answer to that, and could get back to you on that as well. I could do that research.
Okay, thank you.
One of the items that we have done as a part of the bicycle standards, for even considering a lane reduction, we're using, again, Association of Central Oklahoma Government's data, but the magic number is about 10,000 vehicles a day. So for a 2-lane road in Oklahoma City, whether we're looking at it to be widened, or in this case, if we're looking to remove a lane, that 10,000 vehicles is that threshold. And so as we look at those two numbers on screen, the 6,300 or the 5,200, they're just within that threshold that we know that a 2-lane, 1 lane in each direction plus a turn lane would be adequately supported based on the current counts.
Have we talked to Tinker Air Force Base at all about any impacts they may have? Because I believe their commercial truck entrance is right there at 59th and Air Depot.
So we have not had any of those reach outs, or we haven't had any additional stakeholders. But again, if they've got a drive or something that's on this route, we would definitely contact and coordinate with them on the change.
Okay.
Do we know how the growth in this area is for homes, residents, things along those lines? I mean, is this going to impact the development and the growth of this area?
So I think, all these areas of Oklahoma City have potential for growth. Probably Jeff would have a better maybe comment to make on that, just as the planning director, and any studies that maybe they have done.
Jeff Butler, planning director. We looked at it's pretty built out. There was a little bit of room for development. Mostly it would be kind of the industrial type and non-residential. So we feel pretty confident that there would not be a large increase in traffic. The traffic count, like Eric mentions, about 5,000. A 3-lane road could handle 2 to 3 times that amount that's currently on there. So there's not a lot of projected growth that would happen out there, just a little bit, and it's what could happen, the amount of growth that would happen or the amount of traffic that would happen on this street would be well within what the new 3-lane could accommodate. I also might mention one of the reasons that the board did not make a recommendation is that we had trouble getting quorum that day, and one of them had to recuse because they would benefit from this project. So that was really a main reason they couldn't make a recommendation as well, in addition to what Eric mentioned.
Thank you.
In light of all the questions raised, if it's procedurally correct, I'd like to defer this to the next meeting so I can go out and take a look at it myself.
Certainly, that motion is in order. All right, we'll take that motion. Is there a second? And obviously, we want to handle this virtually, too. Got a motion and a second to defer this item. This is item 9R on the consent docket.
Are we still able to make a comment on it before we vote? How
Sure,
does that
go
work?
ahead. Sure, go ahead. Go ahead, right now. Go.
Right now?
Yes.
Okay. Fair enough. So yeah, I'm glad. Let's go have some field trip time. Jeff, where'd Jeff? Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to make you sit down. I wouldn't have done that to you, buddy. I was just looking up Better Streets and Bike Walk OKC. I think a question I have that I'm still a bit confused is I see right now there's not a plan to connect the, it looks like the Tier 1 goes as far as Santa Fe, and it's not connecting to where we've just put new sidewalks on 59th Street over by Jefferson Middle School, right? So I'm thinking very specifically about Western, maybe Pennsylvania area on 59th. So point being, when I really think about 59th Street, and it's a street I've thought about a lot, even though I'm a North Side representative in the Paseo, I taught at Jefferson at 66th and Blackwelder. So in my mind, I think about 59th Street and its connectivity out to where this infrastructure is going to be. So could you help me understand this kind of filling in the blank area between, like once you get over the interstate and you're in this sort of Western Walker area, do we have any plans? Are there conversations?
Yeah, great question. So as Mr. Winger mentioned, so the original plan would have been to take this facility all the way, underneath the freeway. The problem is that right there around the freeway, the traffic counts increase substantially. So there's really not, we don't want to take room from the roadway in that area. So we're going half a mile or a mile to the east where the traffic counts drop substantially. And so we're taking eastern up and kind of rerouting bicycle traffic and up eastern, and then they would take the Grand Trail. So as far as 59th goes, that's still kind of an unanswered question that we will address as we update Bike Walk, getting people on 59th as far east as we can, making that connection as pedestrians. And cyclists as well. This is a work in progress. The main purpose of this 59th corridor going out east was to be able to connect lots of people in the city, especially those on the that live in the core, the south side, over to the lake and that trail system there, and also over to the employment uses over there. And we wanted to do that in the safest way possible, and that's just up eastern and connecting to the trail. But you're right, it remains to be seen how we can best connect pedestrians along that same corridor. And that's an important consideration, too, that we need to look at.
I would love to learn more as we do, because now I'm starting to think about the neighborhoods just to the east of Western, and I'm almost wondering if that's not part of the pathway to get people to where the infrastructure would begin on Western, closer to that. I don't know. I'm just thinking aloud, listening.
No, yeah, good point. We have. I don't have the network in front of me, but there are various proposed pathways there, both sidewalk, some trail actually in the area, and on-street bike facilities. And that's one of the areas that we're focusing on, knowing what we can do now on 59th Street, how can we kind of reconfigure that network to make it work in the best way possible.
Yeah, so this would be for 2 weeks of a deferral, right?
That was the motion.
Okay. If anywhere in between now and then you all have any thoughts on this connectivity mode, that would be very helpful for me in thinking about, because I can't disassociate this project from thinking about that connectivity to that kind of urban core right there. So
absolutely, we'll take a look at that. There is another project further to the south, a couple miles, that will also provide eastern connectivity. But yeah, we're trying to make the network as complete as possible. So yeah, we'll take a look at that and get back with you on it.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me entertain that idea.
All right, cast your votes if you have not already for this deferral motion. Passes unanimously. Item is deferred 2 weeks. All right, moving on. Item 9W, Councilwoman Nice, you wanted to speak to this?
Yes, I think I've mentioned it once, but I'm
Lips are
speaking.
handed in out there. I think you've gone through this before. I'm sorry, I can't hear what you're saying, but. All right, we'll have someone go out and meet you. Sorry, Councilwoman Nice, go ahead.
I was, before I was interrupted, I was saying that I had probably mentioned this previously. We've seen it once, but I'm excited about it, so I'm going to say it again. That we are looking forward to the construction that's going to begin this summer. So I'm sure here real soon. Is there, and maybe Mr. Winger, do you know an expected date of this project to begin? I see summer, but this is really for residential streets from Northeast 23rd Street to Northeast 36th Street, from Martin Luther King to Kelly Avenue, which is much needed for our community.
So I don't have the exact date, so we are working with the contractors to have them start within 90 to 120 days.
Okay.
And then the completion is expected in the spring of 2022.
Thank you very much. And if when you do have a date, will you let me know for sure? Thank you so much.
All right, item AB, Councilman Cooper, you wanted to speak to that?
Well, less than I speaking to it, I was just wanting to hear an update from Public Works as we're putting this in its kind of final steps. So maybe another Eric moment.
No, thank you, Councilman. I'm happy to present on this item. This is item AB, and it is the final acceptance for the Oklahoma City Tennis Center clubhouse improvements. Just to really share the history of the project, this project was actually built in 2 phases. Back in 2016, the original improvements were completed where the indoor courts were created. It was a partnership project with OKC Tennis, so it's been a joint partnership since the beginning. This phase is actually the phase 2. When the original construction was completed, it did not include a clubhouse, and so this clubhouse was a separate bid. It was a separate contract that was proceeded. It began in the December of 2019, and it was recently completed this spring. So we're happy and that the entire project, both phases, is now 100%, and happy to answer any additional questions you might have.
I believe you've answered them. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, going backwards real quick, we've had a citizen who signed up to speak on item 9W, Michael Washington. Please state your name and address, and you have no more than 3 minutes.
Oh, excuse me. Michael Washington, 2900 Northeast 18th Street. Can anybody hear me perfectly, or do I need to remove this? Well, now, we have a project here that is designated for, let's see, RD. Where am I at here? I was kind of slightly shocked to have gotten past that. I don't know what time still, I know it's flying, but I'll take over. Okay, now, a more than $3 million project to renovate, obviously, 23rd Martin Luther King all the way up to 23rd, actually 36th in Kelly now. So that's like an L shape then, I think, would it be? Now, what my understanding of this project here is that it sounds like to me that some gentrification is going on real strongly here. Now, what do I mean by gentrification going on real strongly? Well, now we know about the different projects where the stores have moved in on 23rd Street. We got one coming on 36th Street, so that's kind of almost connectedly in an eerie kind of way, because again, there that L goes. 36 and Lincoln, coming all the way around, back around to 23rd and Martin Luther King, which again, in and of itself is not bad. However, now, is it necessary then, Madam Ward 7, for these people to be given their designated amount of about almost a little bit over $3.6 million for this project? Now, what are we doing? I mean, is it going in the pockets of unnecessary, needless people here? I mean, how many need to do this, to do that? That amount of dollars sound like me y'all finna do all the way over east side and northeast side all over. Sound like to me. Now, let me, I know I may be getting a little ahead of myself here, but then you're gonna assign Terracon Consultants Incorporated as a testing laboratory and approving contracts and bonds. As a laboratory, now that kind of scared me. I said, what's going on here? We're going to put some people up to experimental projects? I mean, I'm lost at it. I mean, it's just here. Now, I know they say, well, you can read on our website and all that, but that's not giving me enough information here to adequately talk about what I need to talk about regarding this issue tonight. Okay. Now then, RDNJ LLC ADBA ATEC Paving Project. You're right now, okay, that sounds like a nice name. That's designed to make non-facilitatory things to give us a clear understanding of what we're reading here. You know, once again, these people are robbing the citizens and the taxpayers of dollar bills that we could be keeping in our pockets today. I don't care who's behind it. I don't care if it's a black face running it, white face, Chinese, Hispanic. You still should not be giving this amount of money until you let the people know on the northeast side
30 seconds.
thank you, that you're not taking our area away from us. We know that Europeans are trying to move back in. Again, I love and respect everyone, but I have to say that rather than in a different name. We know that Europeans still saying white folks, that's not appropriate. I know the Europeans want to move back and take back over in the 60s like they did the northeast side, and they're getting help from the city council, and I don't like it. With that, I'll ask for a copy of this here later on. Thank y'all very much, and I'll be back.
And Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, Mr. Winger, please address this. And to the point of, you know, it's quite frustrating when we have to have these continuous conversations, to be quite honest. Gentrification is all over. It's not just, I'm talking, you had your 3 minutes. Gentrification is all over our communities in our city. Yes, we have seen it look differently in the African American part of our city. However, we have to educate ourselves as well in understanding what is taking place and how to prevent it or create healthy gentrification in our community, because we can do that. We can do that. So this particular project is 2017 GO bond money that the voters voted on in September of 2017 to say, yes, this is a project we would like to fund. So that means the people who live in this community also said, yeah, we want our streets resurfaced. Now, it's unfortunate that it's coming in 2021, but projects like this come a little later than they're supposed to. Right now, we're working on the Willa D. Johnson Recreation Center, also a 2017 GO bond project that is in the works as we currently speak. We're still working on 2007 projects, unfortunately, for all across our city. So this is no different than anything else that's happening around us. And we should be really excited that we're getting our streets resurfaced, because it comes at a time when we need this attention in our community. Unfortunately, we've had to have these conversations quite a few times to get us here, but now we have it. We can all pay attention and know if these streets are not resurfaced in a way that we, as the community and the people who live on these streets every day, are comfortable with, we can come back to this meeting and say so. So if you live on one of these streets between 23rd and 36th and Kelly and Martin Luther King, you have something to say. Otherwise, you do not. So thank you, Mr. Winger, for your comments as pertaining to addressing everything he just mentioned. And please talk about the testing laboratory in particular.
Thank you, Councilwoman. So as we complete 2017 bond projects, and this is one of the listed projects, one that was actually on the ballot, voted on by the voters of Oklahoma City. It's among many others that are residential. We also have a number of arterial street reconstruction projects. The total in the 2017 bond is about $497 million that's going towards residents and homes in Oklahoma City. The citizen survey has shown that streets are the #1 citizen concern. And this is a way for this council and Oklahoma City to address those concerns. So this isn't the only project. There's a lot of these projects that are coming forward. The item that you have today is the award of the construction contract. It was bid to actually I would say it was bid to any eligible pre-qualified contractor. 4 of the bidders did submit bids, and RD&J, doing business as ATEC Paving, was the low bid for this project. The laboratory that is assigned is a laboratory that's also under contract with the City of Oklahoma City to ensure that the work product that goes in meets all of the city requirements and standards. As the contractor does that work, they'll take samples of the asphalt and other materials. They'll make sure that the thicknesses of the work are the proper depths. And it's simply a quality assurance for Oklahoma City, just to make sure that they're supporting also our city inspectors that are out making sure the work is completed. We do lots of these projects. We've been doing a lot of these projects as a part of the Better Street, Safer City sales tax program, and this is just a part of our Better Street, Safer City bond program. And there will be more items coming to this council in the future.
Thank you very much. So basically, as we understand, testing is for the safety of the residents.
AK, Councilwoman Nice, you wanted to speak to that?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. This is another street resurfacing project, and this one is in part of more of our rural part of Ward 7. So we are grateful for the partnership with our county to be able to resurface this area of Northeast 150th Street at Hogback Road to 1.5 miles east to our city limit. And I know we have received numerous phone calls about this particular area of our ward as well. So I do want to just highlight again that this is coming for our residents. And again, this is in partnership with our county, our Oklahoma County, for this project. So thank you very much.
Councilwoman, may I add, I know this is your ward. I can't help myself right now, though. I would just like to speak a bit of a solidarity with you. These are 2 projects that are street resurfacing, and my understanding is it's not an L shape, it's an entire block, or not just block, it's like bound by.
It's a square mile.
Yeah, like it's Kelly to Martin Luther
Yes.
King, it's 23rd to 36th.
Correct.
And so this is mostly for anyone watching that I'm going to say this, because I know this council is more familiar with this bond discussion. But if we all recall, a few weeks ago, right, during the budget, I gave a bit of a history. Dr. Blackburn gave us a history on, race relations in our city. And one of the things I added to the end of that budget discussion with that documentary was the fact that throughout the 70s and the 80s, we attempted as a city 5 different times, recall that conversation, to pass a bond. 5 different times. 5, and failed all 5. We couldn't pass a bond to improve our city's infrastructure. I am so thankful we now live in a city where every 10 years we pass these infrastructure bonds. Do I want an interim bond? You bet I do. Do I want more money coming even from the federal to complement what we're doing? You betcha. Same with the state. Give us more. That'd be great to see our taxpayer dollars come back and put to use in investing in our cities. So I say that as a moment of solidarity with Councilwoman Nice and the good people of Ward 7 to say, only because I've heard this before, that the city council might be in favor of gentrification. So I want to go on the record right now, as I did with public transit earlier. That is a priority for me with public transit, and so too is making sure that we do everything we can on the east side of our city and in this urban core to not displace people. So I want to be on the record saying that. I want to be on the record saying that. And I want to be on the record saying that I And I know that this council heard that history piece a couple weeks ago. We know now the history of segregation and white supremacy, and we know what happens when we don't pass bonds. It is a beautiful moment to see this bond come over there and resurface where it's about to resurface, and I'm very thankful for that. So I just wanted to express that. I've been wanting to say a version of that for the last 2 years when I've heard these sorts of comments made toward Ward 7. So.
All right.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Well, that concludes the items that anyone had pulled out on the consent docket, so we could take a motion to adopt the consent docket except for the item previously adopted and the item previously deferred. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
I'm sorry, and one more thing. Audience, please go share with our neighbors that it is only every 10 years that we get to do those bonds. Go share that with them, because a lot of them don't know. And they will be very frustrated wondering why their streets aren't being resurfaced. And let them know that every 10 years, they are having this opportunity to list items and to get those projects resurfaced, new drainage projects, bike lanes, parks, you name it. If we don't share this information, we will be subject to disinformation. So,
For
All
some
right.
reason,
Is everyone
I'm
casting
not
votes?
coming up on the screen.
How do you wish to vote on the consent
I
docket?
vote yes, please.
Okay. Passes unanimously. All right, item 10, the concurrence docket. We have items A through D we could take with one motion. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
I vote yes, Mayor.
Okay. Passes unanimously. All right, we are now at item 11, items requiring separate votes. We have item 11A. This is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 8809 and 8819 South Sunny Lane Road, going from SPUD 514 to I-1. Councilman Stone.
Thank you, Mayor. Has anyone signed up to speak?
No, and in fact, we have no one who signed up to speak on any zoning case.
Wow. Well, this was recommended by staff, approved unanimously by the Planning Commission, so unless someone has some questions on it, I would like to move for its approval.
All right. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11B, ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 7701 East Memorial Road, going from AA to RA. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, I do know the applicant is here, and I understand there were no protests, so for this, I will move for approval.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11C is an ordinance on final hearing. It was recommended for approval at 8005 West Hefner Road, going from R2C3 and O1 to R2. Councilman Stonecipher.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a duplex development. Planning Commission recommended approval. There are no protests, so I'd move for approval at this time.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11D, ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 5808 Northwest 159th Street, going from AA to R1. Councilman Stonecipher.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on final hearing for residential development. The Planning Commission recommended approval. There were no protests, so I'd move for its approval.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes as soon as you have that opportunity. Passed unanimously. Item 11E, ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 116 South Clegern Avenue from R3 to I1. Councilwoman Hammond.
Yes, as you mentioned, passed was someone absent, but passed Planning Commission and recommended by staff, so I will also move for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11F. This is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 740 Northwest 122nd Street, going from R1 to R4. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, I do understand that we had no protests, and this is to permit a multifamily development, so I will move for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11G, ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 9820 West Wilshire Boulevard, going from R1 to PUD 1819. Councilman Carter.
That he thought he having when he bought the property, and it's recommended for approval, so I do too.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Councilman Greenwell? Passes unanimously. Item H was previously deferred. Item I is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 8606 North I-35 Service Road, going from PUD 1348 to PUD 1821. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, there were no protests, and the purpose is to add RV and ATV sales and auto storage to the uses. So with that, I will move for approval.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11J, this is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 2350 North Sarah Road, going from R1 to PUD 1822. Councilman Carter.
I move for approval.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item K was previously deferred. Item L is ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 1045 Northwest 49th Street, going from SPUD 662 and SPUD 971 to SPUD 1301. Councilman Cooper.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Has anyone signed up to speak, or is the applicant present? Would you like to speak? You don't have to. I don't want to put that pressure, but you're already up.
Linda Tulo with Synergy, 810 South Cincinnati, Tulsa, 74119. Just want to say we're excited to be a part of Douglas Place Edition. Looking forward to being part of that family. Any questions?
Just wanted to say thanks for chatting with us about doing some kind of landscaping stuff there, and we're excited to have you there. And with that, we would just move for approval.
Thank you.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Here's what I need from you.
Item M, ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 12520 North Mustang Road, going from PUD 919 to SPUD 1315. Councilman Carter.
No objections. I move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11N, ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 2412 North Ollie Avenue, going from SPUD 788 to SPUD 1319. Councilman,
Are you seeing that? I'm not making that up, right? Yes. Is the applicant present? Yes, they are. Their representative. That's wonderful. If you did. Please, thank you.
David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. This is an SPUD for an existing building that was zoned at some point in the past and limited the building to a yoga studio only. It's sat vacant for quite some time. My client intends to keep the building as is, but allow for small events to happen, no more than 50 people. So I believe it'll be a good repurposing of that existing building. It's a very cool old building, but the ability to have something other than just a yoga studio was something that was needed to be done here. This actually went through not only Planning Commission for recommendation, but also had to go to the Urban Design Commission. So both the Urban Design Commission and Planning Commission did provide recommendations for approval for this SPUD.
Thank you for that backstory. I'm very much looking forward to seeing it, this establishment join, the nearby church that's right there, that beautiful Gothic church. Uptown, Western's there, so with all that, I would just welcome them and move for approval when I can.
all right, got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item 11O, this is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval. It's a special permit to allow a drinking establishment in the C4 General Commercial District at 2215 Northwest 39th. Councilman Cooper.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Is the applicant or their representative present? Oh, please come on. If you would like to, you're welcome to come on up.
Mary Newman, 4200 Frisco Bridge, Edmond. With the approval of the special permit, my husband Patrick Newman and I hope to establish an upscale bar lounge on 39th Street that will contribute to the revitalization of that area, and we feel that it will be a complement to the existing businesses, and we certainly would be grateful if we get the permit.
My. Just as I spoke to the importance of the Britton District within Ward 2, 39th Street District, as you've probably heard me speak prior, means a whole lot. And so I'm sure you're stepping onto an area it means a whole lot, not just to me, but to a lot of the neighbors there, yes. And then people, quite frankly, who live all across the state of Oklahoma, who've come to 39th Street, found love on 39th Street, heartbreak, friendship, communion, you name it. And I'm here to welcome you. So.
And that's what drew us to the area.
I had a feeling.
We love the spirit. We do.
That's wonderful. So with that, I'd move for approval and welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right, you have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item P, this is the public hearing regarding the dilapidated structures here listed, except for those struck at the beginning of the meeting. Has anyone signed up to speak on this public hearing?
No.
No. All right, then we'll move to 11P2, which is the resolution declaring that the structures are dilapidated. Take a motion on that. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
Take what you can get. Yes, I do.
Passes unanimously. All right, 11Q1 is the public hearing regarding unsecured structures here listed, except for those struck at the beginning of the meeting. We do have someone who has signed up to speak on this public hearing, Guy Parkhurst. Feel free to step forward and state your name and address.
My name is Guy Parkhurst,
Guyparkhurst, and I'm at 611 Culbertson in Oklahoma City. Most of what I was going to say may not be necessary. Did I understand the city manager to defer both 410 and 416 when you talked about uncontested continuances? That would be items S and T.
Just 410. Looks like 416 is still on here. So 416 Northeast 16th is still on the agenda. 410 was struck.
Well, struck.
Not deferred,
That's
struck.
right, struck.
Like it's
But
off the list now.
But
But
416.
Yeah, I was going to say it should be struck. That's what code enforcement told me. So we're still talking about 416?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be very brief. My contractor was supposed to do these jobs before your previous meeting 2 weeks ago. He didn't show up, and I spoke with the city manager and several other officials, and he then arranged to do the job last Thursday, 5 days ago. He said he wanted to do it then because then he would have time to complete 3 addresses that are consecutive historic homes that I own. He did 410, he did 418, and I said, what about 416? Where are the garage doors? He said, they are hard to get because they're 8 feet tall instead of 7 feet tall. I cannot get them at this time. So I'm only asking the city council, please, for one further extension to your next meeting. I will either get those doors on or I will use plywood to cover up and make that opening secure. But otherwise, there will be a lien on my property on Friday, I'm told. 4 days is not really enough, but 14 will be, please. That's all I have.
I'm happy to defer it, Mr. Parkhurst. I'm happy to do that for you for 2 weeks.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I
So I
appreciate
will-
your help.
Thank you. I will ask that we defer 11Q, which one is it?
1T.
1T, thank you so much, for another couple of weeks for Mr. Parkhurst.
All right, let's do that virtually now. We've got a motion and a second to defer that item. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. No one else has signed up to speak on this public hearing, so we will move on to 11Q2, which is the resolution declaring that the structures are unsecured except for those struck and the one deferred. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11R1 is the public hearing regarding the abandoned buildings here listed, except for those struck at the beginning of the meeting. Has anyone signed up to speak?
No,
They
Mayor.
have not. So we will advance to 11R2, which is the resolution declaring that the buildings are abandoned. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11S is to approve the Emergency Physicians Foundation Medical Control Board budget for fiscal year 2022. And I believe we have a presentation on this, Mr. City Manager.
Yes, sir. Dr. Goodlow is here to make a presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, all. Privileged to be here. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Goodlow. I have the honor to serve as the Chief Medical Officer for our EMS system for Metropolitan Oklahoma City and Tulsa, which obviously encompasses IMSA and the Oklahoma City Fire Department. It's my privilege to submit our budget for the next operational year. I'm representing the 11 physicians on our medical control board. 64% of them have teaching appointments at the University of Oklahoma or Oklahoma State University Health Science Centers. And the 5 members of my Office of the Medical Director, both Dr. Knowles, our Associate Chief Medical Officer, and I have full-time academic appointments at the University of Oklahoma Health Science Center. And I mention that because I think this past year we have seen the importance of scientific information, not misinformation, in these unprecedented times. And that is so important, not just for the physical health, but the mental health, the economic health, the social health of our communities. We are very, very committed to taking care of every citizen of Oklahoma City and visitors of Oklahoma City when and where they need emergency medical care the most. We are responsible for the development and promulgation of the clinical standards of care that nearly 3,000 EMTs and paramedics utilize in caring for these patients at the site of these medical emergencies. And I'm very happy to report to you in our latest calendar year data analysis, calendar year 2019, the survival for a witnessed sudden cardiac arrest in which our emergency medical dispatchers are able to provide just-in-time telephoned CPR instruction and help those bystanders do some critical CPR in the few minutes it takes for Oklahoma City firefighters and EMSA EMTs and paramedics to get to that patient's side. The survival for those patients that we find in a defibrillatable rhythm is 42%, and that is the second highest in the history over nearly 30 years now that we've been measuring this in our EMS system, and that compares very favorably nationally with a survival of 13%. So over a threefold increase in survivability and sudden cardiac arrest in those situations in metropolitan Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Very importantly, 93% of those individuals are neurologically intact. So these EMTs and paramedics are not just doing amazingly heroic life-saving care only for folks to wind up in skilled nursing facilities and very neurologically deficient. These are folks that we get right back to their families, right back to the work, right back to the quality of life that matters most to them. And we are incredibly humbled and privileged to be able to be a part of that team. I want to also compliment Oklahoma City Fire Chief Richard Kelly and the President and CEO of EMSA, James Wenham. Not every city can talk about the cordial and cooperative relationships that they have with EMS physicians, fire chiefs, ambulance executives. That is not something that we take for granted, but it is something that we consistently enjoy here because we are all united in taking care of people. That is what we love to do. So I'm happy to answer any questions about our EMS system. I thank you for the support of this budget. Of note, these are not additional monies that you would be approving. These are already monies contained within the Oklahoma City Fire Department budget and the EMSA budget, but as a matter of maintaining the independence of medical oversight in our system, each year I come to the council for a separate approval specific to these funds. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Freeman and your office for assistance in the support for this.
All right, any questions, comments? If not, we could take a motion to approve the budget.
He's outside to speak if you want to tell her.
Okay.
I'll just say, too, while we're waiting, how much I appreciate Dr. Goodlow and his leadership and just the partnership, because I think he's right. The relationship that's there between EMSA and the fire department and with the Medical Control Board is better than it's ever been. And I think with that partnership, I think we're seeing, we do see better services. We have a lot of challenges with EMSA in hiring and keeping paramedics on the road, but they're doing a great job and really working trying to address that. And I think their leadership and advice helps us to be better all the time. So we appreciate that.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve, and we do anticipate being back with you shortly to talk about some of those staffing challenges in our EMS system and some innovative ways to best utilize the fine EMTs and paramedics that we do have available to us today.
That's great.
What's going on? All right. Well, if it's that hung up, do we just want to do it verbally? All right. Remember how to do that, everybody? Okay, we got a motion? Second? All right. If you want to call the roll? Or I guess Amy call the roll.
Oops. Councilman Carter?
Yes.
Councilman Cooper?
Yes, please.
Councilwoman Young?
Yes.
Councilman Stone?
Aye.
Councilman Greenwell?
Yes.
Councilwoman Hammond?
Yes.
Councilwoman Nice? Yes. Councilman Stonecipher?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mayor?
Yes. Thank you, Doctor. All right. Motion passes unanimously. Now we're at item 11T, resolution adopting the City of Oklahoma City Emergency Operations Plan as revised and authorizing the city manager to implement said plan. And I know we have a presentation here as well.
Yes, sir. Frank Barnes, Captain Frank Barnes, our emergency medical director is going to, emergency management director. We already had the emergency medical director. The emergency management director is going to give us a quick presentation on the updates on the emergency operations plan. There you go. You just needed Amy to walk down there for you.
All right. Good morning. Thank you for giving me a moment of your time to briefly go over the annual emergency operations plan adoption. And, okay. Oh, you're going to get it for me? Thank you. Next, okay, got it. Okay, so we talk about a polycentric response, and in the city of Oklahoma City, when we have a major emergency or disaster, it's what we call a polycentric response. You have multiple organizations, public, private, non-government organizations, who acting under their own authorities will respond, and then they perform their assigned roles and responsibilities using their organic capabilities and resources. And the big challenge when you have that kind of a polycentric response is coordination. There's no centralized command and control where there's someone telling them what to do. They all know what they need to do, and they do it, but it's coordinating that. And you have to think of a multi-lane highway where you have everyone in their lane doing what they're supposed to do. And when you get ready to change lanes, you coordinate that change of direction by using your turn signal. And it's the same thing with coordination. Coordinating changes in what a mission, what an organization is doing, the scope of their work, if they're demobilizing or they're coming onto the scene, whatever it might be. It's a coordination of that effort. And this allows both private sector, nonprofit or NGO organizations to participate in the response and the recovery, because the city and government cannot do it all. Next slide. So the Emergency Operations Plan has an emphasis on coordination. It defines the roles and responsibilities of who does what, and then it provides a framework for that coordination of those activities. As I mentioned, it is a framework. It is not a step-by-step guide. It's not a procedural document. It's not a how-to guide. It's a framework, and it relies on resourcefulness, creativity, and improvisation. It's an all-hazards plan, and what that means is we respond to the result and not to the cause. And the best example I have is if you have a building collapse and a building falls down, the response to that structural collapse will be the same, regardless of why it fell down, whether it fell down from an earthquake, natural gas explosion, act of terrorism, poor construction, material defects, whatever it might be. The response to that structural collapse to find the victims, to rescue them, to get them to medical care will be the same no matter why it fell down. It applies to the city wide, to all the city and to all city departments. It's always active. It doesn't require myself or the city manager or the mayor to activate. It's ready to go at all times. And it's scalable and flexible. We can scale it up or we can scale it down depending on the size or complexity of the event we're dealing with. Next slide. So for 2021, the changes we have are not that dramatic. They're really pretty minor. In the basic plan, we made a clarification with disaster volunteer management. There had been a reference to a plan that was out there. That plan no longer exists, and although there's one in development, it's been in development for many years and has not yet come to fruition. It's being developed in a collaborative effort between local emergency managers and the Oklahoma VOAD. Appendix A, the situational overview, it provides an overview of the city. That was updated by the Planning Department. I want to thank the Planning Department and Ryan Baker for doing that for us. We update that every couple of years, putting the latest data and information about the city. In Appendix B, response phase activities, we made a clarification with reunification and Family Assistance Center, clarifying that reunification is where we try to reunify the living with their friends and family, and a Family Assistance Center is typically when you have injuries and fatalities, and providing assistance to the families following that event. Under roles and responsibilities, we deleted some organizations that no longer exist. We added in the assistant city managers under the city manager. We also added some roles and responsibilities to the city manager's office and ACMs as well as finance. We put in some generic wording for the arena and for the convention center. Previously, they were identified by name, and we went to a generic wording for those two facilities. And then in Appendix F, under the Oklahoma City Multi-Agency Coordination Center, we simply made reference to using Microsoft's Teams for doing as our virtual platform that we use for our virtual MAC activations. And then lastly, the Hazard Vulnerability Analysis Annex was updated. There were new calculations based on the new data and information, so it was simply brought up to date. Next slide. And that is it. Any questions? Okay.
All right.
Appreciate Frank's leadership with this. It's just, this is a significant amount of information in here, and there's so much more that even goes behind this that helps us make decisions and know how we work, and the work that Frank does in his leadership, as you all have seen through storms, through pandemics and everything else. I just appreciate their work and continuing to lead us using this document.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. All right, well, we can, are we technically capable of? Nope. All right, is there a verbal motion and a second to adopt the resolution found at 11T? Got a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilman Carter? Yes. Councilman Cooper?
Yes, please.
Councilwoman Young?
Yes.
Councilman Stone? Mayor?
Aye.
Councilman Greenwell?
Yes.
Councilwoman Hammond?
Yes.
Councilwoman Nice? Yes. Councilman Stonecipher?
Yes, please.
All right, motion carries unanimously, and the resolution is adopted. Thanks. All right, now we're at 11U1. This is a resolution considering the salary continuation request of, does it usually say considering the salary? Or is it approving the salary?
It should be an approval. I mean, it's approving it, yes.
All right, I mean, as long as, I guess what matters is what the resolution
Right.
says. All right, we'll assume it's resolution approving the salary continuation request of Sergeant Christopher Weaver for up to an additional 6 months. I don't believe executive session is requested. Is there a motion and a second on this verbally?
So moved.
Got your motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilman Carter?
Yes.
Councilman Cooper?
Yes, though I will note on the memorandum, it still says that considering.
Ultimately, what matters is the resolution. What's the resolution say? But we can pause there for a moment.
And then on the resolution, it says considering at the top.
It's the now therefore that matters.
Actual ordinance.
Now, therefore.
We have it there.
Yeah, I see the title also says considering.
We'll think about it.
Granted.
Yeah,
Right,
it's
the now
granted.
therefore says that it's granted, the resolution's adopted, so it's.
All right, that's what matters, but if that's a change in policy, fine,
Yeah.
but that is a different language, I think, that we're used to. Okay. All right, where were we?
So then, yes.
Yes.
Councilwoman Young?
Yes.
Councilman Stone? Aye. Mayor?
Aye.
Councilman Greenwell?
Yes.
Councilwoman Hammond?
Yes.
Councilwoman Nice? Yes. Councilman Stonecipher?
Okay, motion passes unanimously. And now we are at item 11V. This is a question to enter into executive session to discuss collective bargaining negotiations for fiscal year 2021-2022 with the FOP, the IAF, and AFSCME. There's no action here, but we are going to go into executive session to receive updates. And so we need a motion and a second and then
I'll
a
move
vote
that
to
we
do
enter
that.
into executive session, please.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilman Carter? Aye. Councilman Cooper?
Yes.
Councilwoman Young?
Yes.
Councilman Stone?
Aye.
Mayor?
Aye.
Councilman Greenwell?
Yes.
Councilwoman Hammond?
Yes.
Councilwoman Nice? Councilman Stonecipher?
Yes, please.
All right, motion carries unanimously, and we'll handle that executive session at the conclusion of our other business. I'm told we now might have the opportunity to go and do the votes as we usually do. And so as we advance to item 11W1, claims recommended for denial, I don't believe we need executive session, and we can potentially take a motion virtually. There it is. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11X. 1, claims recommended for approval. I don't believe we need executive session, but we could take this item virtually and with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, now we're at item 12, comments from council. We'll start with Ward 1. Ward 2.
Thank you. So first, just to reiterate, the July 31st Britain District. Grace, what time? So from 4 to 9 p.m. on July 31st, please come visit us in the historic Britain District for all the lovely things you heard earlier, food trucks, also seeing the new businesses that are beginning to call the historic Britain District home. And as you heard from Councilwoman Nice, the two of us will be there as well. Very excited about that. And then I also wanted to say congratulations to Embark and all those involved in the successful ribbon cutting ceremony for the ferry service that Embark provides. Got to participate with that earlier this week, and I thought that was, or last week, and that was wonderful. And then final two comments I have are kind of related, but first, happy birthday to the Ward 7 council person. Very honored to serve with Nikki Nice, to know Nikki Nice, to have worked with Nikki Nice, to laugh with Nikki Nice, to get upset with Nikki Nice. It's been a range of emotions for the last couple years. But very, very much happy birthday. And I think I said there were two kind of final comments there. One of my favorite moments to kind of segue from talking about Nikki and celebrating her life. One of my very favorite moments was about a year and a half ago, leaving on a Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, on a plane with Nikki to go to the National League of Cities. It's a conference in Washington, D.C., and it's everything you would imagine. It's a conversation about, quite frankly, all of the concerns I mentioned that Ward 2 has. I mentioned those earlier. Walkability, how to improve that, public health, homelessness, transit, you name it, and it's just this conversation amongst municipalities. Well, Nikki and I had quite the conversation on the way there. Time flew. We just talked and talked and listened and talked. And then as the plane landed, our phones received service again, and the notifications appeared on our phones as we were literally landing in D.C., and it said, first COVID case in Washington, D.C. And so this is the weekend, the Saturday before the Jazz player. And of course, Nikki and I just kind of looked at those notifications and we're like, can we just turn around? How's this work? We're right here at the airport. Over the next couple days, That Saturday, we went to the African American History Museum, which it felt like a college student cramming the night before a test because there was so much information. We spent the entire day there and still didn't feel like we'd gotten it all. The next day at a conference, at that National League of Cities conference, there was signage that said, this will be now a no handshake conference. Sanitizer was everywhere. I mean, you just felt this shift. And then as we would visit with senators or Congress members, on their TV screens were images of Italy shutting down its economy. I say all this to segue from what is a very pleasant, memorable, arguably just kind of defining moment, the first time that two black folk have sat on council together, having the opportunity to travel together and represent our city, but then to have COVID lingering right there. I'm really, really worried about this moment we're about to re-enter. Is my second thing I wanted to say. I don't want us to revisit the number of lives that we were losing at the peak of that virus, of this virus, this global pandemic. And so I'm really worried, and the message that I have is the same message I've had from the beginning of this year, which is, please, if you have not yet, go to vaxokc.com and get a vaccination. The time for conspiracy theory and YouTube videos is over. It must be over. We're looking at around 65% of the county that we are moving toward that vaccination herd immunity. That was the numbers I've heard from county health officials. But we have to push past that 70. We need to push past that 70. People's lives depend on it. You all are seeing the same thing I'm seeing in the news, that the folk who are finding themselves unvaxxed are the folk who are most likely right now to end up in our hospitals. 1 year ago this month, almost 1 year ago this week, we had unprecedented emails to this council, unprecedented phone calls to this council on the topic of a mask ordinance. It was 1 year ago, barely 1 year ago. And we enacted that mask ordinance specifically to help relieve pressure, we recall this, on our hospital system. The hospitalization numbers. There are only so many nurses, there are only so many doctors, and there are only so many beds. The news stories we're hearing right now are taking my mind back there, and I do not want our city to go back there. I don't even know what it would look like to once more have conversations again about mask, about social distancing in the ways that we did over the last year. So I'm very, very worried about this. And I think for us to pretend that this is not a worrying moment is to simply pretend. So I just really wanted to speak that from this council this morning, that I share that concern, but that there is this ability, again, go to vaxokc.com. I've already volunteered at Northwest Classen High School last week to make a video on behalf of this. Northwest Classen calls Ward 2 home. I know that a lot of the people who still haven't received the vaccination are people who are not necessarily anti-vaccine. They're just saying, when this vaccine, I'll get it when I can. I'll get it when I can. And I implore those folk that now's the can. Now is the can. It's critical to do it now. It is critical to do it now so we do not have that pressure on our hospital system again, on our first responders again. I do not want to put those first responders in the horrifying positions they were last year. And I will remind everybody that this COVID, the death it brings with it, the aloneness it brings with it when one is dying from it, the drowning sensations, this is not a joke. And I'm worried I'm really worried we are in an inflection point. And I would just encourage everybody again to visit that website, get that vax, get that little stick in your arm, and I think we'll be in a better place. But I just wanted to put that note out there that is something that I, as the representative of Ward 2, who thinks every day about the welfare of our residents, that's something that's heavy, heavy, heavy on my mind right now. So thank you.
Good morning. So I would just like to remind everyone or tell you, if you don't know, that the 4th annual Oklahoma City Boots and Badges Blood Drive is this Saturday at Riversport OKC from 7:30 to 2:30. You can sign up for a time on the Oklahoma Blood Institute's website, and obviously coming after Councilman Cooper's comments regarding COVID, blood supply in Oklahoma City is almost always at a low point. We're a very adventurous bunch in Oklahoma City, and we do crazy stuff. So please take an opportunity to contribute to the solution. Also this weekend, West 10 is doing their litter blitz with another organization. I don't want to say it wrong, give me a moment. Reaching Our City. And so that'll be occurring in the West 10 district, and we're very excited about their commitment to keeping their particular district clean and the contributions that they give from an economic development standpoint to the city of Oklahoma City. So I just want to encourage everybody that's in that area to participate in that, and maybe bring that sort of idea to your area as well. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to kind of reiterate on Councilman Cooper's thoughts there, and that is that, if you haven't been vaccinated, I know it's a personal choice, and we're allowed to make that personal choice, but I implore everyone to go get vaccinated. I hope they do. Really hope they do. But I also wanted to thank you, City Manager, for taking down my hockey penalty box that was around me. It feels 20 degrees cooler in here today, and I greatly appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, unfortunately, I have the opposite opinion, hence why I'm wearing my mask today. I'm honestly, and I think I appreciate Councilman Cooper bringing it up, because I felt like I was going to be the only one like, why is everyone pretending this is over? And to the point he was making about the number of vaccinated people is, those are the people who are eligible. People 12 and under are still, just don't even have the option. And I'm concerned that as a city, we are, with the removal of the partitions, that was really the only thing making me feel comfortable not wearing a mask in this space. And I don't know, but I know when we were, I can't speak for all of our other boards and commissions made up of volunteer residents, but I know when we were coming back to in-person meetings, I got a number of calls from various board members and commission members really concerned, even though they were in the process of getting vaccinated, and we know that breakthrough cases are very, very small, that you can still pass things along. And I think anything we're doing to not help in that mitigation of that spread, especially if it's just because we're a little warm, like I just don't really understand why we're like, feels like we're just wanting to remove any like physical, visible, reminder that this is still an issue. I don't have kids in my life that I am around every day, but I know people on this council do. I know people that are in these meetings, board and commission meetings are, and I just, when we're about to get back into school and that this is spreading quite a bit among children because they don't have that layer of protection and don't even have the option for it. It just, to me, I'm not really sure why things like physical distancing and physical barriers to reduce, especially when we know, like I've been in settings where I feel somewhat comfortable being unmasked around groups of people, but it's because I'm not going to be spending a lot of time sitting there talking with them or standing there talking with them, whereas our meetings often last 3 to 4 hours. Other commissions and board meetings often last hours and hours, and there's plenty of talking in close proximity. And so I guess I'm frustrated that we received an email about the partitions coming down less than a week before they came down. And again, it's just anything we can collectively be doing to mitigate spread, especially to our most vulnerable residents in our city, children. Because again, I might not get very sick because I'm vaccinated, but maybe I pass it on to someone and they get very sick. And that's just all I have to say. I'm just honestly very frustrated that we got this news and then less than a week later. And again, not on the recommendation of the City County Health Department, that we're not taking their guidance on these sorts of measures, especially as a public entity that has a lot of different people coming to this building on a regular basis. So that's all I have to say.
Yes, I also wanted to just encourage our community and our residents to protect each other, clearly to get vaccinated. And I know even one of the things we have to also look at is our city structure, where we are with our numbers as well. And it's one of the things even I mentioned with the chamber. We can't ask people to do things that we aren't doing. And that's very difficult to really say, please do these things, or we want to reach this percentage when we can't get there at whatever that goal may be. So I'm hoping we can continue to look at that and look at how we can encourage more of our city, not only our city residents, but our city staff and employees, so we can continue to protect each other as far as being vaccinated is concerned. I just wanted to make mention of a few things, and while I'm on the Greater Chamber of Oklahoma City, I still didn't really get my questions answered that I asked, and I think when we just talk about one entity that we say is our diversity and inclusion, that's not enough. That's not enough. That's we're using them as, in my opinion, as the pawn to say, oh, this is the entity we use. But what are you doing as an entity yourselves, as a business, as a person who influences other companies and businesses? What are you doing? So I still don't have that information. And I think also, as we heard from the legislative actions and policies, that there's no diversity even in that committee. There's no diversity in that legislative body that helps to extend the mission of the Greater Chamber and their legislative actions. So even with that, it's concerning to know what the real priorities are, especially for when I think about minority businesses that are within Ward 7 especially, that I have not seen because they had to shut their doors, or I think of businesses just in general across our city that are minority owned or woman owned that are no longer with us, or had quite a few barriers to get them just some kind of stipend or relief, should I say, for them to be able to try to make their ends meet for their business. So that's very concerning for me. But on the upside of other things that are happening, I know I do want to continue to commend our HR department for being available for the job fair that we're having with the Northeast Farmers Market at Pitts Recreation Center. It's happening every Saturday in July, so I have received feedback from folks who have been going on Saturdays to at least receive information. And I will re-emphasize it is more of an informational than a job fair. So I know I have understood people are dressing up and going to go talk to our HR folks, which is wonderful. But really, it's more of an informational for them to get the information and start the profile to find those jobs. So we do know that is an opportunity for the community. Also, want to thank South Chamber for the City Connection breakfast. Myself and Greg from the Oklahoma City Zoo, we were able to go there and be a part of their City Connection and talk about some things that are happening on the south part of Ward 7 and also how great the Oklahoma City Zoo is. If you didn't know, our footprint is bigger than the San Diego Zoo, and they charge $54 where we charge $12. Yeah. So more reasons to just say and praise the things that we have going on in our city, especially in the Adventure District. Garden Oaks, we want to congratulate the men of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. They broke ground. If it wasn't last week, it was the week prior, for a new community center. So they'll be renovating the old Garden Oaks School and creating space for the neighborhood. And a lot of different resources and nonprofits will be housed in this building. And the neighborhood association will be also using this as a community space. So that's one great thing. We're able to turn that school back into the hands of the community for their use. And at the South Chamber City Connection, I got a date. I believe it was September 18th for the First Americans Museum to open. If I'm not mistaken, that was the date that they told me. So I know we've all been waiting years, many years, for a day to celebrate them opening their doors. So it is finally here, and I understand they're putting the exhibit in the building so they can enjoy and we can enjoy what they're doing. One more thing here. Yesterday, the mayor and I and our community members, we were at the Homeland, and they announced their day that they're going to open. So we have 43 days before we open the doors of the Homeland in Northeast Oklahoma City. And let me just dispel some myths, because unfortunately I read the comments. And one of the comments that I read was, as far as the date opening, have they announced the date that it's going to close, and they're going to need extra security. So I just want to make this comment. People steal everywhere. It's not subjected to one area or one part of our city. And I will say, just because we're getting a new grocery store does not mean it is not for the people who live over there, where some I know think that it's not. But this is food access, and this is a great thing, and our community members will be employed by this effort. FaithWorks, they're also off of 12th and by Shiler Elementary. They just built 7 brand new affordable homes, and if you read about it in the Oklahoman, that community in our area of Ward 7 is going to be the home for 7 new families to have a new beginning. And I'm hoping, as we look into MAPS 4, that this model of what affordable homes can look like can be a model for what we're looking through and looking towards as well. So the last thing I have is Eastside Vintage Market. It's going to be on August the 7th at 36 in Spring Lake in the shopping center parking lot. So if you all have any gently used items or anything, if you've been cleaning out because you had so much stuff, bring it. It's $20 for a tent, and the proceeds, as far as your $20, is going towards the Willa D. Johnson Endowment Fund. So all of this is for us to continue to raise money. So we've raised over $20,000 thus far for the goal of 50. And because we raised 20, the Community Foundation matched that 20. So they will be matching 70,000 by the time we finish this effort. So we're still on our way, and this is one of the ways we can continue to raise that money. So happy to have that opportunity, and that's all I have.
Nothing today, thank you.
All right, we have 2 citizens who signed up to speak under item 13, citizens to be heard. First up is Milena Valentine. If you wouldn't mind stating your name and address, and keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. Thanks.
My name is Melina Valentine. I'm from 14900 North Pennsylvania Avenue. So I stand here today to address a problem that doesn't I think it doesn't affect just, it affects everyone who like is in the top 1% or the upper middle class. It's about wage, basically. So no matter what you do or where you go, there's not escaping of inflation or the rising increase of pricing. Sorry. So really the main issue I want to focus on is that the wealth or the wage inequality and the fact that there isn't anything done about it. I did see there was a news article that a senator did try to increase or propose a bill, but that didn't get approved. And I did hear in the news that there's a proposal to increase you guys' wages. I do have a few sources that I saw online about it, that it's really $7.25 and you cannot live off of that. Because according to the census for Oklahoma, the median rent income is about, I think, $810, which is, and you're working getting $7.25 an hour, working full time, you would only get about, you only get about $1,160 a month, and that's before taxes, so you would actually get less. So I just think that we should kind of focus on trying to at least increase our wages for the common everyday worker, because you can't live off of $7.25. You just can't, and it's really sad there's not much or anyone trying to address that issue. So I think that that's really a concern of mine that I would like to see addressed or some changes implemented to try and at least increase our state, have our own implementation of increasing a state minimum wage, if that would be possible. And hopefully that can go towards restaurant workers as they only get $2.13 an hour plus tips. So thank you.
Excuse me, one more time your name? Melena Valentine. Thank you for your advocacy on such I've been scared. I've been scared speaking at that Lantern. I am so kind of in awe of you right now. So you're talking about an issue that means so much to me. So I really want to thank you. And it means a lot to a lot of the restaurant workers in Ward 2 who make that exact wage that you're talking about. So I really want to thank you on their behalf for advocating on their behalf, because many of them are probably right now about to start that lunch shift, right? So they can't be here. And so you just became their voice, and I really, really appreciate that. So I have just two more things. One, some bad news, but then I think some good news. You ready? So the bad news I'm to understand is that state House members and state senators, and unfortunately the governor of the state of Oklahoma, have made it where we can't at any city in Oklahoma, not one city, can raise that minimum wage that you and I and those workers know need to be raised. They've passed an actual law saying no city can raise, I know, same. But they made a law, I have that same reaction, but they've made a law where they say that no municipality can raise their minimum wage above what the state standard is, that's $7.25. I don't like that. I don't think that's a good exercise in letting local government decide for themselves what's best for their residents. So that's the bad news. But the good news is a name that Councilwoman Nice used earlier, State Senator George Young. He's been advocating in our state legislature as a senator, and as you heard Councilwoman Nice say, he represents a good part of Oklahoma City, and each year he's been bringing up a bill to raise the minimum wage. He's got quite the fight on his hands, I'll tell you, because not a lot of people in the state House or Senate agree with him. But please reach out to him and let him know about your advocacy and why it's important, and be a part of that coalition that he's building to try and accomplish exactly what you're advocating. And I just really want to thank you for taking time out of your day to be here with us. It's very, very helpful to hear your comments. And the courage to say it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Michael Washington.
Very, very helpful young lady. Thank you there. Now, you got my support. Now then, back to the matter at hand here. Thank you. Yeah. Have you put it up yet? Oh, okay. Well, now, let me, if I can, invite each and every one of you out to our monthly protest of the Oklahoma County Detention Center here in Oklahoma City. We are here advocating reform in the jail system, which is severely flawed and needs deliberate, fast, and quick improvement. We gather there on the last Saturday of each month to let people, citizens, know all over the world that we do not appreciate the inmates being treated as less than domestic animals would be treated. We're here today to let the world know who may be visualizing this setting that we will not tolerate the deliberate, flagrant, and misuse of human beings for the sake of the wealthy's personal pocketbooks. However, can you tell me that this is not the actual situation that's actually going on, when in reality then, that each time there's a problem we hear with that jail, there's always someone out here dying, someone being left without food, someone don't have an opportunity to tell their side of the story. But that's why they got Michael Washington and his group for. Because from 1991, out of all that's been going on, there's been no money allocated for the purpose of correcting an error, an errant condition and situation where inmates can't sleep at night, don't have the proper food, don't have a proper outdoor recreation, can't change their bed linen out, don't have access to an adequate medical system. Several systems changed out medically. Now, come on, y'all. They can't even change their bed linen. Are we serious about this, really? This needs to be changed immediately. And the only way I see that it's changing is that we file a federal civil rights lawsuit, which I have restlessly been trying to put together. And that's going to be hard because you got too many actual politicians behind this disturbing reality. This situation needs to change, and we're not going to tolerate it any further. So again, y'all need to come out on this coming Saturday at 1 o'clock and hear the master speak. That's me. I don't bite my tongue. I don't pull any punches. And everybody's going to know that these changes have to be made. My phone let me know it's almost time. Just a minute, I'll be there. But anyhow.
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Anyhow, myself and others believe that these changes can only be made if there's a collective effort on all our parts. So until we all can get together and act as human beings supposed to be in our authority and power to help make changes, even if it's nothing but lobbying, writing letters, emails, or whatever the case may be, this is needed in order to bring changes to a very drastic situation here in Oklahoma County Jail. Thank y'all so much, and I'm willing to answer your questions here tomorrow or any day. Have a great one. I'll be back.
Thank you. All right, we previously voted to go into executive session for item 11V. We will now do that. There are no votes after that. I have to step away, so when we return for adjournment, it will be Vice Mayor Nice presiding. Thank you. Okay. All right, come forward. If you'd state your name and address, thank you.
This is talking about case number PC 10733, rezoning. I submitted an opposition letter to the rezoning, so I don't know what happened, but I heard that there was no opposition, so I wanted to come up here and read my letter. I'm speaking for about 4 of the families that live right in the area where this will directly affect them, as well as me and my family. We are submitting this letter in opposition to rezoning the above referenced area. We reside at 7401 East Memorial Road. Out of the properties surrounding the area to be rezoned, there are 4 families that will be directly affected by this plan. We have personally spoken with all of them, and they are in agreement with us. Generations of families have lived in this area for years, and we do not want a residential district built in our backyard. We all moved to this area because we didn't want to live in a residential neighborhood with neighbors right outside our door. We moved to this location for the land and the nature. 3 of us will be directly affected as the proposed plan infringes upon our very backyards. The applicant, U Storage Oklahoma, claims the construction will leave as much of the habitat as untouched as possible in order to preserve it. However, a neighborhood cannot be built without bulldozing down a lot of trees and digging, etc. How undisturbed will these acres and acres of beautiful land look after electricity, water, 20 houses, roads, etc. have been established? How much more traffic will this add to the already busy Memorial Road? How much noise are we going to endure with construction of the proposed development? As our concerns continue to increase, we'd like to request that the following assessments be performed to evaluate the potential impacts the proposed development would have on our community. A noise impact analysis, an environmental impact assessment, and a traffic study. Please let it be known that we are in firm opposition to this application. Sincerely, Mark Emery, which is my husband, and Michael Emery, which is my brother-in-law. I realize you've already voted on this. I just wanted to make our opposition known. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, we will now go into executive session.
All right, we are back from executive session and we have no formal business, so we are adjourned.